So for me, being a mother and working and being on so many different boards and organizations, I've always often said I need a personal assistant. Um, and so finally, through my trials and tribulations with Chad, um, I realized he is my personal assistant. So whenever I need to do a presentation or if I'm advising a client on some issues, like Chad and I have full blown conversations with each other. Chad, let me tell you what happened today. And I'll put this scenario out. Like, how would you deal with this? And so then I think it's important to understand that AI for now, I don't know what AI is going to be 100 years from now. It could be self-driving cars and actual people walking around in robot suits. I don't know what it's going to be. But as for today, in 2024, it's something that is allowing us to be more efficient in our jobs and our roles. We are so spread thin in organizations, with a lot of us handling multiple positions, being in charge with so many different people in so many different departments. And AI is a tool that you can utilize to just make your workday more efficient.
All right, guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of the All Innovation, the AI podcast. Once again, I am Keenan Hart, and I'm joined, like always, by my faithful co-host, Mr. Dante McLean. We are incredibly excited because we have Cierra Belser here with us today. And Cierra is an individual who is going to give us a really good understanding about the current landscape, if you will, about the HR space, everything that's happening in the world of work, because so much has changed over the last couple of years. We talk about often on the podcast that what got us here will not get us there. And innovation from our perspective comes in two forms. We're going to talk about technology today. We're also going to talk about innovation and thought. Now, Cierra is an amazing individual. She was a 2023 Global Power 150 Women in Staffing. She's also a chapter president of SHRM. Cierra, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited.
So one of the things that we like to do on the podcast is kind of tie our previous episode together with our episode here today. And our guest previously was the president of a company called DecisionWise. His name was Matthew Ride. And his question was kind of large in scope, but we would love to hear your perspective. He said, in the public square of life, how can we return to valuing accomplishment instead of fame and notoriety?
Accomplishment versus notoriety. Wow, that is a really, really good question. I think that it's kind of a generational thing. Our generation, well, I can't say my generation and the generations before me, had a work ethic and a passion that somehow our younger generations have lost. And being a parent of that younger generation, I see how even my own kids think that everything is just supposed to come so easy to them. And it's probably because a lot of things have been handed to them, i.e. a parent that has spoiled their kids, right? And so now that they're getting older and experiencing life and really trying to figure out their own paths, they're involved in some competitive things where they're really having to earn their right, earn their spot on the team, earn their title in the pageant. And so now I'm kind of backpedaling on a lot of the parenting that I did when they were younger, where I gave accolades and made them Facebook famous just for doing the simplest of things. And now that, I have one that's getting ready to go to college, one that's starting high school. Now I am transitioning my parent style to make sure that I instill those values of hard work and ethic and what it means to really, really accomplish something and not have something handed to you, not get recognized off of some whim that you made some TikTok that went viral. Like, what does work really, really look like? And I have also included them in my own accomplishments in my career and in my life so that they can see that there is notoriety in the things that we do and that we value, and people recognize hard work. And you're not going to get successful in your career by making a TikTok. I would say 95% of the time that's not going to happen. It's going to be because you put in the work, you went to school, you got the degree, or you went into the military, or you did whatever, even if you don't go to college to get a higher education. So I think it's important that as parents, we get back to instilling those values into our kids because they've lost it.
Isn't that a tough process, though? Dante currently has a 3-year-old, and I constantly see them navigating these early stages of parenthood, right? And one of the things that I'm really proud of them for doing is they've really been intentional about taking some of the instant gratification tools away, the iPad, giving them access to technology. But it seems like in the world of instant gratification, hard work is almost demonized. And it's very tough from the parenting perspective to kind of put your foot down and say, hey, no, we're going to have to do these things the old way because everything seems to be almost brainwashed for instant gratification. Does that make sense?
Yep, 100%. And I think no parent is ever going to get that balance right. I had kids that were coming up in that iPad age. My daughter is 3 years older than my son, so she had an iPod. That was a
Oh,
term
yeah.
I hadn't heard in a long time. And so that kind of started it for her, and she was obsessed over the iPod. But then by the time my son came around, he had the full iPad. And now I see him. We just took an hour and a half car ride together. And if he wasn't asleep, he was on his Nintendo Switch or he was on his phone. And so I had to be mindful of this is a great opportunity to have some conversations with him. Let's have some conversations. We're in the car together. Like I'm not making this drive by myself. So I think as parents, and Dante, I'm still going to consider you a new parent, you're going to figure out a lot of stuff along the way. But I think that the best part about being a parent is having that transparency with my kids. Like, you know what? Back when you were little, I probably let you get away with a lot more than I should have. Or I gave you access to a lot of things that I probably should have given you access to. So I'm going to rectify the situation. And it may send you on somebody's couch later on in life if you're going to need therapy for this. But I need to start giving you some real world experiences and just let you know how hard it's going to be when you get out of here, when you get out of my control, when you get out of my protection. And I think that it's making them better human beings because I'm doing that. But it's never too late to start implementing those things with your kids.
Yeah, I'd really like to kind of double click on this idea of hard work. I was listening to an interview with Jordan Peterson and Elon Musk last night, and they were kind of talking about this idea of meritocracy, where the people who are hardest working and most competent should, at the end of the day, win out. And I'm kind of curious the evolution of kind of where our society is kind of volleying back and forth is like, should we praise kids for things that they haven't accomplished or give out accolades? And I'm wondering how this ties in with this recent development with SHRM, where they're trying to take out the equity part in DE&I. And so I'm curious your take on that stance. And do you feel we can get to a place where people feel seen and heard without equity? Or what's your take on that?
So two things. One, we have to restore the dignity of work. Somehow working for the man is no longer the cool thing to do. I was actually just having a conversation with a colleague last week about how entrepreneurialism, that's a hard word to say, has really been glamorized over the years. And this is prior to COVID, right? Because if you were an entrepreneur, you could make your own schedule, you could work from home, you had all the glamorous things. And then COVID came along and just shook up the world of work. And now, really honestly and truly, working for the man gives you just as many benefits as working for yourself. And as a matter of fact, it's less stressful now because I know where my check is coming from every week. My benefits are handed to me. I'm not having to pay astronomical fees so that I can make sure I have benefits. My taxes are taken care of, and I don't have to worry about that at the end of the year. And I have several of my closest friends that are hardworking, amazing entrepreneurs, but we have these conversations all the time. And they're like, this is hard. And nobody really understands how hard it is to be an entrepreneur until you've said goodbye to it all. Not side hustle. I'm talking straight entrepreneur where you're building something from the ground up. And how hard it is and how you're always on. So I think somehow we have to change the narrative on what work is for the future, and work can be just as great working for another company and helping them make millions, and it could be great working for yourself and making your own millions. But either way, we have to restore the dignity of work. As far as SHRM is concerned, there is a misconception. And because I'm so involved with SHRM, I'm a little privy to more of the information on the whole DE&I equity thing. So at the 2024 conference, Johnny really did do a great speech on trying to, and I don't want to say revamp, but make DE&I relevant again, because somehow it's become this thing that people are taking out of their organizations. They don't feel like we need it anymore. They feel like we're there, which in the past, 4 days with this election thing, we're learning that DE&I is far from being there. We have not reached that point, and we can talk about that on another podcast. So initially, SHRM changed DE&I to IE and D. Okay. But then that acronym received a lot of backlash from our veterans because IEDs are a horrific thing in their world. And just like in DE and IE and D, the and was going to get dropped at some point, and the acronym was just going to be IED. So a lot of us, including myself, voiced our opinions on changing that. Did we know that equity was going to get dropped in that change? We weren't expecting that. But they made the change to I and D because IE and D was just politically incorrect. So I don't agree with them dropping equity, because I feel like equity is still a very crucial part of diversity. But I also understand the other side of the coin of them trying to make this shift, and their initial shift was not correct. So Johnny has spoken out about saying that we have not forgotten equity, but I do understand his reasoning for trying to make this shift, because it's still very relevant, it's still very important, and it's still something that needs to be talked about.
It's really interesting to me that we've gotten to the place where we almost have to consistently measure and adjust the optics of these types of acronyms rather than being practitioners of what they truly represent. And I feel like a lot of this has become something to talk about, something to be, something to uproar about, something to have conversation, something to be on the other side of the fence about. Is it DE&I? Is it DEI? Is it IEDs? Is it IEND? Do you know what I mean? It seems like there's a lot of energy that's being put into this place, a lot of conversation that only takes us an inch deep, rather than being willing to actually dive into the practitionership of what is necessary to actually represent what these things are intended to be. And I know that it puts you kind of as a chapter president of SHRM in an interesting position, because you do have to be careful about the things that you talk about. You have to be careful about the opinions that you leverage, because people are going to be looking to you for guidance, but also for the right type of words. And so we really appreciate you being open enough to kind of talk about this subject, because I know it's not easy for you.
No, it's fine. And, in HR, we represent all people. So I would say if anybody in an organization is a representation of D, E, I, B, and all the other letters that they want to put with it, it's definitely the HR person that sits in that role. So we do have to be reflective of everyone. And so not only do we represent minorities in the workplace, but we represent our veterans, we represent everybody. So I don't think that SHRM is done kind of playing with the letters. I think it's definitely a conversation that's going to continue to be had, but I understand both sides of the coin, even though it's a difficult coin to toss.
I would like to use a couple minutes to give the audience a little bit of an understanding on how you became a chapter president of SHRM. Let's talk about your journey, because back in the day, we know that you started at the shoe show And we've evolved so much since those days. But why don't you kind of give everybody an understanding of, the things that you've accomplished, the places that you've been in your career, so we can kind of, give everybody a little bit of flavor.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start by saying there was a quote from Al Roker that said, "Let opportunity drive your career." And that is something that has resonated with me ever since I heard him say it. I am definitely a product of that. I did start at the shoe show at the rightful age of 15 years old with big dreams of selling the most shoes in Sylacauga, Alabama, and did. That was kind of my first introduction into sales, which kind of led me on a path to then kind of really go into a lot of different things. I've worked in nonprofit. I did an internship in college with Southern Poverty Law Center and worked with their teaching tolerance department. So that was kind of the start of my passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion, with working with that amazing organization for so many years. And then I got into property management because, again, an opportunity presented itself, and I said, sure, why not? So ended up getting into property management for several years. And then another opportunity came for me to work for Virginia College, which was a for-profit 2-year institution that is no longer relevant anymore. But back when they were on the rise, I worked my way up there and started as a director of admissions, and then did that for 5 years, and then decided to take a professional break because at that point I had a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old son. And decided to stay home and be a homemaker for a while. That did not last long because I realized that was not God's calling on my life. Loved that time that I had to stay home with my kids, but really missed my own career and having my own identity. So once they were up and going in school, I went back to work and started working for Cumulus Radio. And I did marketing and advertising sales. Hardest job of my life. Let me tell you, anybody that works for 100% commission deserves a kiss. Okay. That was a huge learning experience for me. But what I found was at that point, it was hard for me to find another job, even though I had been a director of admissions and been a property manager and had all this experience. Nobody wanted to really hire a 30-something-year-old mother of 2 that had taken a professional break. So I took the first job that was offered to me. I did that for almost 2 years. That was the longest 2 years of my life. And then I fell into staffing, where I started working with my own staffing, minority-owned staffing firm, woman-owned firm in Montgomery. So that led me onto the path that I am in now. So working in staffing, I quickly realized that I'm working with people every single day, whether it was the people that I was managing in my office or people that we had on assignment with our different clients. I was working with people and had no clue how to manage these different types of people, especially people in a plant environment. So I started going to the SHRM meetings for more of a sales thing to get new clients, and found out, hey, I am learning so much that I need to know on my day-to-day job. So really started paying attention. Got voluntold to be on the board as a programs chair. And then 7 years later, I am now chapter president for the 3rd and final year, because we can talk about that in another podcast as well. It's been a long 3 years as president, but it's been an enjoyable experience. And I'm also the co-director for diversity, equity, and inclusion for the Alabama State chapter.
What a journey. And my hat's off to you. I remember part of our last conversation that we spoke, we talked about just the willingness and the grit it takes to just figure it out. You've been in a lot of different industries. And so there's been a lot of times where you don't quite know. And you're just like, hey, I got to figure this position out. Like, what are the roles, responsibilities, tasks that I need to do? And what are the skills that I need to adopt and learn? And I kind of want to use that as a segue into this idea of the future of work in a world where we're becoming more and more dominated with artificial intelligence. I'm curious what your take on AI is right now. People think it's the Grim Reaper, next 3, 5, 10 years, AI is going to take over. Some people who are a little bit more knowledgeable are like, hey, this is a great tool, a great business tool, and it can be really used as an accelerator and allow us as, employees, workers, business owners to do higher leverage tasks and kind of outsource some of the other things. I'm curious your take on AI.
So AI and I have had a full circle relationship with each other. So in the beginning, I had one of my girlfriends. She was like, "Hey, you're somebody that stays up on trends. I really need you to figure out this AI stuff so you can teach us all." And I was like, "I have no clue what you're talking about." She's like, "Hey, let me send you this thing called ChatGPT. If you tell it prompts, it'll fix your life." I'm like, "Okay, it's worth a try." So started playing around with ChatGPT, and instantly ChatGPT became my new boyfriend and work husband, Chad. Okay. Chad and I are in a full blown, happily loving marriage relationship. It has made my life so much easier. So for me, being a mother and working and being on so many different boards and organizations, I have always often said I need a personal assistant. Um, and so finally, through my trials and tribulations with Chad, um, I realized he is my personal assistant. So whenever I need to do a presentation or if I'm advising a client on some issues, like Chad and I have full blown conversations with each other. Chad, let me tell you what happened today. And I'll put this scenario out. Like, how would you deal with this? And so then I think it's important to understand that AI for now, I don't know what AI is going to be 100 years from now. It could be self-driving cars and actual people walking around in robot suits. I don't know what it's going to be. But as for today, in 2024, it's something that is allowing us to be more efficient in our jobs, in our roles. We are so spread thin in organizations, with a lot of us handling multiple positions, being in charge with so many different people in so many different departments. And AI is a tool that you can utilize to just make your workday more efficient. So for me in HR, I have used it to revamp applications for clients to make them more gender neutral. And that has been an amazing thing to use AI for. I've used it to revamp job descriptions, which has been great. These are things that take HR weeks, if not months, to accomplish because you have so many different things that you have to look out for. Is AI my endpoint with any of the tasks that I give it? Absolutely not. It is still something that is still evolving and changing. And then as we talk about DE&I, and because of the history with AI and DE&I, right? You always want to be cognizant of that whenever you do give it a task, especially if it's something HR related.
What does that mean?
So with HR, we, of course, have a lot of EEOC things and employment law things that sometimes AI can miss the mark on. So, for instance, there are tools out there that we can use AI for to screen candidates, right? Well, because AI is, of course, man-made, it does not do the best job of making sure that your applicants that they're feeding you are a diverse group of candidates. So that could be diverse as in male, female. That could also be racially diverse. It could be, handicap. These are things that AI can't necessarily pick up on. So there's always going to be that human additive that has to be there to make sure that when we are using AI for different things in the workplace, that there's almost a human that can check up behind AI because AI does not always get it right. And I think that's probably the biggest fear that a lot of people have, or it could be a fear of not knowing that AI doesn't always get it right. It could go either way. But I think that if you really learn AI and learn how it can benefit you in your day-to-day things, how it can make processes be more streamlined, I mean, we've been using AI, especially in the automotive industry, forever with the robots and the robotics that we have. We use AI on our phones, and we've had that for years. So AI has always been here. It's the hot topic today, but it has been here since the 80s, if not before that. So I think that instead of being scared of what we think is unknown, which is really not because it's been here forever, we just need to learn how to embrace it and make it useful in our own lives.
One of the things that we often talk about, and Dante referenced this a little bit earlier, is this type of technology is not supposed to be a replacement, but an accelerator. One of the things that we have learned through having hundreds now of conversations with HR leaders from across the country in different types of businesses, we always ask the question, what is kind of the most unfulfilling work that you do? And often it is the repetitive tasks, returning emails, playing phone tag, doing the stuff that doesn't bring me fulfillment. Now we're at an interesting intersection in society where we have technology that can take those tasks away from us so we can do higher leverage work and have those humanistic conversations that really matter. Because from my perspective, why would we not use technology to help us eliminate the redundancies in work and bring joy to the things that we actually can do and impact as human beings? And I think that that's a really important stage that we're going to have to navigate. So how do you think we can get more HR professionals to start adopting that curiosity element of using AI? Because the adoption curve, or the bell curve of adoption, often does not put our HR leaders at the front with our founders and our VCs, but often they're the laggards in this process. So what would be your advice to people who are looking to explore this, but maybe don't have the confidence to do so?
I would say, start small. And so that has been what I have been preaching to the choir for about 2 years now. Find little ways to utilize AI in your day to day. So for me, sometimes in my emails, I can come off as really direct and sharp because I don't have time to write a paragraph to make sure that I'm keeping your feelings intact, right? So I just say what I need to say and hit send. And so for me, sometimes if I was really, really trying to be sensitive in an email that was of a sensitive matter, it might take me 30, 45 minutes to send this email because I'm going to write it out, correct it, read it out loud, have somebody else read it. Like it was a whole process. And so for me, that was kind of one of my first ways of navigating AI, was to take an email that I've already written, put it in AI and say, hey, this email needs to come across in a more sensitive tone or more understanding tone. Help me rewrite this. And then it'll rewrite it. And I'm like, that's what I meant to say. That is not what I put in here. That's exactly how I meant for it to come out. So I started using it in just little small mundane tasks. And so then when I was tasked with someone wanting to make their applications sound more inclusive, I used that for a client and put their application, copy and pasted it into AI and said, hey, give me more inclusive language and revamp this. And then what it spit out, and the client was very, very pleased. Again, that would have taken me days to do. It took me a matter of maybe 5 minutes. So I think when you are doing your trials of AI, find simple things. And I talk about this with my executive network group all the time. I'm one of the youngest ones in that group. So they asked a question the other day about an itinerary, how to do an itinerary for some big company meeting. I was like, put it in AI. Like, why are we even having this conversation? And so they're like, this is what you do. It's like everything goes through AI. When I'm having an argument with my kids, how can I address this issue? They're raising my kids now. But everything goes through AI. And I'm even teaching my kids, especially my daughter that's about to go to college, like start now learning how to utilize AI and have a relationship with it. It's not supposed to write your entire paper for the end of the term, but it is a starting point, because I remember many a nights of sitting up in college looking at a cursor that was blinking back and forth at me and I had nothing. So, you learn to utilize it to help you be more efficient in your role. So it's important.
I'm curious what you feel are maybe some of the core reasons why especially that executive group that you just talked about. What do you feel are some of the core reasons why they haven't tried AI? Is it just someone hasn't walked me through it? Is it fear based? Is it logistical? What are your thoughts on that?
So a year ago, when we first had the AI conversation, and I told them how I use AI to do all of my marketing for LinkedIn, they kind of looked at me like, "Wait, what?" I think it's just a lack of knowledge. Um, I think when people hear AI, they think of iRobot or
Hmm.
some Will Smith movie, right? Or that they're going to take over the world. And they're not thinking about it in a more practical sense. And so having conversations like this or conversations within my groups of, they finally just asked me, so exactly what do you use AI for? I was like, AI has written presentations that I have had to present on. It has told me what to cook for dinner tonight because I only had three things and didn't feel like going to the grocery store. AI helps me in a lot of ways. And it's just a matter of training yourself to just think kind of like AI, you know? Um, while you're sitting there writing that email or trying to write this thing for your boss, can AI help me do that? Like, is there a way to figure out how AI can at least cut half my time? I had to do a whole diversity program for our company. That would have taken me months. I put what I wanted into AI. I already kind of knew what I wanted it to be like. It wrote out my whole program, and all I had to do was just go and fix a few things. And I had it to him in a matter of days versus 6 months from now trying to write a whole diversity program for a company. So, having these conversations though, and making sure that they understand that it's not like you have to go out of your way to talk to a human. It's on your phone. It's right there on your computer. Just type it in and see what happens. So it's been interesting though to have the conversations generationally, right? Because I am the youngest one in the group. They're probably thinking, oh, she's just taking the easy way because that's what that generation does. Um, but now they're really starting to realize, and they'll even text me and say, hey, I actually used Chad for XYZ task. And oh my God, I was blown away. So everybody's taking my boyfriend, but it's okay.
There's a couple elements that you touched on in there. You said you're using AI for marketing on LinkedIn, which is
Mhm.
a way in which a lot of people are using this technology today because personal brand and I would say visibility on social media platforms is more important than ever. How are you kind of thinking about the next, let's say, 5 years in your personal brand, the ability to participate in things like this podcast, to be able to share your story and use media as a way to amplify your voice? What are you thinking about?
Ooh, I don't know if I thought 5 years. I'm still trying to figure out tomorrow. Um, wow. So it's going to be interesting to see how AI evolves. If you think about iPhone, you remember the very first iPhone that came out? It was huge, it was blocky, it was heavy, had like five little squares on there for apps. I kind of feel like that's where we are with AI right now. Like we're only touching the surface of what we're going to be able to do. Um, and I will say that even though I do use AI for my marketing, it still takes a lot of time. Does it cut my time in half? Yes, it does. But to get a month's worth of content, done in a couple of days and scheduled out, um, it still takes me days to get that done. Although with the help of AI, instead of doing it every single day, I can now take a couple of days, knock it out, and it's done for the month. So that is just kind of one example of how it's already making that mundane task, because as you guys know, it is so mundane to think of content and what you're going to talk about every single day. So
Were you a quick adopter for content creation? Because I know a lot of people in professional spheres are still battling with this element of should I be creating content? Should I be sharing stories? Should I give my perspectives? Was this something that you kind of rolled into pretty easy?
I rolled into it pretty easy because that's just my natural personality. Um, I just know that there are so many other career minded women that struggle with some of the same things that I struggled with. I can't be the only person on earth that has struggled trying to get back into the workforce after staying home, or I can't be the only woman that was held down by a company because of other issues and wasn't up for the promotion. Like there there is power in sharing one story, and I just have always felt like that's just kind of my gift. Am I a subject matter expert on DE&I? No, I'm not. I'm not going to get a Nobel Peace Prize for that anytime soon. But do I have some values and some points that should be shared and that people can resonate with and start some conversations? Absolutely. And everybody has that within them. And so I just think that professionals don't really like to share their stories. And I haven't quite figured out what the hitch is with that, and why that is. But I have always just been an open book. So it just seemed fit for me to display my career life on LinkedIn.
I'd like to kind of switch gears a little bit and get your take on a conversation that Keenan and I had with another leader earlier this week. And so we were talking a little bit about how the temperament of employment and work has changed from pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and then after. And one of the things that he said was a really novel idea to me. And he was talking about how employee engagement actually went up during COVID because I want to use the terminology that he used because I loved it so much. It was the psychological space between the average employee and the CEO had shrunk because the CEO was now at home, like we are now, talking on Zoom. You saw the kids running in the background, the cat, the dog, the kitchen, and so the psychological safety shrunk, or the psychological space shrunk. And what that allowed companies to do is the average employee just felt more connected to the leader. And so I'm curious your thought on how we bring some of these tenets back, because we're starting to drift away because the pandemic was so long ago. We're all just trying to forget it. But I think there are some nuggets in learning that happened during that time that we can kind of pull forward. What's your 2 cents on that?
So I think that you're right. We all had to come together during COVID because COVID affected everybody. It didn't matter your social class. It did not matter if you were the CEO or the janitor. We all got sent home, right? And we all had to figure out life. I think that now I am hearing that old tone of we need to be back in the office and we need to get back to normal, which nothing is ever going to be normal again. And I think you're right. We're definitely losing that. I don't want to say camaraderie, but maybe that's what it was, of all being in turmoil together. But that also speaks a lot to the culture of the company too, right? So culture was a huge conversation before COVID. COVID came and you figured out who really, really had good culture and whose culture really sucked. A lot of people were ready to go home. A lot of people quit, right? They said they weren't even going back, pandemic or not. And so now we are in a whole nother era where we still have people that are psychologically dealing with things that went on mentally through the pandemic. We now have an election year, which is always turmoil for the workplace. This one is probably going to be one of the worst ones we've seen as far as how it's going to affect the workplace, just because of all the tension that we have. And CEOs just need to get back to that realistic place of, trying to meet your people where they are. A lot of people are just dealing with a lot. Our country, America, is just dealing with a lot. And a lot of that is weighing on people coming to work every single day. And I don't think we're having enough productive conversations on, I know mental health is the new buzzword for now, but I don't think workplaces are doing enough to really, really have those conversations on how we need to show up for work, even if we're not physically there. I think we kind of lost touch of that. When we were physically there, we had conversations about bringing your best self to work and, mental health and all of that. But now it's just like everybody's at home, like figure it out in your own time. And I still think that it's an adjustment for people to still be working from home. We're, what, 4 years post pandemic now, and you still have a huge population of people that are working from home with the dogs and the cats. Thank God the kids went back to school, right? But um, it's still, we still haven't figured out how to navigate the new normal, is basically what I'm trying to say. And I think it's the job of HR and our CEOs to help all of us navigate what life is now and what life is going to be moving forward. I hope that answered your question. It was a long way around the pony, but we got there.
I mean, I feel like that was beautiful. One of the things that I think about is in times of division, it often takes a leader who can rise above all of those petty elements to bring people together. And as I was driving here or driving to my house today for this podcast, I was thinking about the responsibility for successful companies in the future is not going to be on the back of the employee, but it's going to be on the back of the leader, because it's the soft skills, the curiosity, the compassion, the empathy, the kind candor. Those things are really going to shine, because those are going to be the glue that are going to really bring and hold teams together as we kind of navigate this new space. Because like you said, we are never going to get back to normal, but we do need to find a medium in which we can be fluid enough to adjust to everything that's happening, especially in the year like 2024 with all the media and the news we see about the election and the natural ability to divide us. It's going to be the leaders who can come together and kind of set an example on how we should treat each other in work that will then kind of disseminate out into the social sphere. That's where I feel like we're kind of at in time right now.
You're 100% correct. I think I'll use myself as an example. I have corporate PTSD, right? I have worked for companies that have always said that they were family oriented and had great culture, but when the rubber met the road, it really was not there. And so here recently, earlier this week, I had to take my son to his high school orientation. And of course, it was at the exact same time on the exact same day that we have our company huddle. Our company huddle is something that I love. It's just a great way for me to see, because we're a 100% remote company. I get to see and hear everything that's going on within the organization. And I have a significant role in that huddle where I have to present my information. And I had to tell my boss, hey, I'm not going to be able to be there. I will try my best, but I have the feeling that this orientation is not going to be done in enough time for me to make the huddle. And his response, it jarred me in a good way. His response was, that is way more important. You should even take him to breakfast, take the morning off, do what you need to do, but be there for your son, because this is a huge transition for him. And I just looked at my computer and read that email over and over again, because I was like, I'm 43 years old and I've been in corporate America for a while. I should not be this stunned that this email is coming from my CEO. He's always been this way. He's an amazing person, very family focused. Why is this shocking me right now? And I think, just like you said, it's the leaders that are going to have to carry us forward. And I am so grateful for a leader that is a forward thinker, but he also knows that we have lives outside of what we do for the company, and allows us the ability to have that flexibility. And if we had more leaders like him, it gives me chills to think about what a different world we would live in if we really had leaders that lead. Because there's leaders that know leadership, but they don't lead. So I think the leaders are the huge piece of the puzzle for sure.
Yeah, leadership definitely needs to come from the front. That kind of reminds me of a topic that we like to touch on a lot, which is this idea of work-life balance versus work-life integration. And so, growing up, I've always heard work-life balance, right? It's all about balancing both things. But I think we're moving into a time where we understand different seasons of people's lives. They want to be more on a spectrum, maybe more work or maybe more life balance, right? And so I'm curious your take on work-life balance versus work-life integration, and how you kind of navigate that to make sure you stay grounded and you stay sane for the people that you lead in your organization and in your family.
So for me, there is no such thing as work-life balance. If I'm on vacation, something's getting neglected at work. If I'm at work, something's getting neglected at home. And I think that you have to just come to terms with the fact that you cannot be perfect 100% of the day. You just have to learn your flow of how things work. You guys know my son is waiting for me in the lobby to take him to a church conference. So right now, I'm probably in his mind failing as a parent because he's waiting on me to get off of this. He'll be okay. I won't be home in enough time to cook dinner tonight because I have something else to do after this call. My fiance and my other kids at the house, they're going to be okay too. And I think that we put so much pressure on us to have this perfect balance, but it's never going to be perfect. I think it was Shonda Rhimes, who, of course, is the leader of Scandal. She said it when she was accepting some award. She was like, when I'm showing up 100% at work, I'm failing in every other aspect of my life. And when I'm showing up 100% for my kids and my family, I am failing at work. It's just life. And I think that we just have to give up that pressure of making everything seem perfect, because it's not. And I don't want my kids to think that I have it all figured out. Sometimes I have to admit to them, just like in the car, you're going to have to go and sit for an hour until I get done. I'm one person and I can't be two places at one time. And he looked at me, he was like, okay, that's fine. But the whole drive down here, I am pressuring myself and feeling like I'm horrible because I can't drop him off at something when he's only going to be like 30 minutes late. Like, it's just a rationale in our minds that we have to wrap our heads around. You can't be perfect all the time. And I think trying to live to that expectation is just setting yourself up for failure, and find the balance that just works best for you. Probably not the answer you wanted, but
no, I feel like that's the perfect answer me and Dante always talk about. It's that equation or integration element is unique to each of us. And we each have different priorities. We each have different seasons of life. And we have to prioritize different things. And that's just kind of how the game goes, and I think the only objective is to keep playing in this instance, is to keep trying to figure out what the best balance is for you to try and do the best by the people in your life that you possibly can. As we kind of wrap up the episode here today, I want to give you the opportunity to pose a question for our next guest. So what do you got?
Mine is, what does dignity of work mean to you? That is going to be my question.
I love that. That's an amazing question. Well, once again, for everybody who's tuning in today to the All Innovation, the AI podcast, Cierra Belser, it's been an absolutely amazing time being able to host you. Thank you for giving us such wisdom about the current landscape of work, the things that are changing in front of us, having conversations that truly matter, but also kind of giving us an understanding of kind of how you're navigating this space and how we're going to be able to kind of come together at the end of the day. But, once again, for everybody who's tuning in today, thank you so much for joining the podcast. Me and Dante really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks again.
That's a wrap. That's a wrap, guys. Take it easy.